Well, hello there, you Scrublords, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be discussing the Object 279 and giving it a quick overview and discussing whether or not it's actually worth your time. We're also going to be doing a comparison between it and its brother, the IS-7. So, without further ado, let's get right into the dirty details because, well, we have a lot to talk about. So what the hell is this thing? Well, this is a Soviet heavy tank program that came out of the Soviet requirement for a vehicle that could survive a nuclear battlefield. The idea was that they wanted a vehicle that could withstand the blast of a nuclear weapon. And I think they very well may have succeeded here. The vehicle's armor profile is rather unique in the fact that it's very squat and rounded all the way around the vehicle, and it's very, very thick too. It's got an average of about 315 millimeters of protection all the way around. Now, there are weak points, and we will get to those, and you will see in the replay files that you're watching right now that the vehicle is far from invincible. It's very strong, but not invincible. The vehicle is very fast. It's got a top speed of 55 kilometers per hour forwards and can reach up to 18 kilometers per hour in reverse, so it's slightly slower than the IS-7, but it's also missing about 50 horsepower compared to the IS-7. In addition to that, it also is 8 tons lighter than the IS-7, so it's a little bit more power, so its power-to-weight ratio is a little bit higher, and the vehicle can get up to speed a little bit faster. So while it lacks some of the mobility of the IS-7, it's at the very minimum equivalent in my experience, or if not better. And this is probably the only vehicle that I've seen in recent memory that will actually hit its top speed of 55 kph, which is pretty impressive. That's something that's not something you see from most vehicles out there. The vehicle is armed with a 130mm cannon, as well, if that wasn't obvious already. And considering its battle rating of 8.3, that's a huge downside, because considering that almost every other vehicle at that tier has a stabilizer. And the vehicle's armor, the IS-7's that is, was designed for a World War II battlefield, yet it is being put up against 1980s and often early 2000s or 1990s equipment. And as a result, it struggles pretty heavily. The 279, however, has much thicker armor protection because it was developed later on. However, it is still a full steel armored tank. It is not a composite armored vehicle. So that does create some issues. It means that some of the really, really high penetration missiles, like ATGMs and top-firing rockets and so on, can do a number on this vehicle, at least as far as the hull is concerned. Also, a long-rod AP FSDS will slice right through the hull as long as you are shooting at the flattest portion facing you, because as it is a cast hull, there is always going to be some sort of relatively flat portion facing wherever you angle this vehicle. In addition, it's also got that classic Soviet 5 degrees of gun depression. It's actually got better gun depression than the IS-7, which makes it a little bit more comfortable on some hilly terrain, but it's still not great. So you want to avoid hills and uneven terrain as much as possible and put yourself on the flattest terrain you can. Other aspects of the vehicle, the fuel tanks. The fuel tanks are interesting because you'll probably notice that I get set on fire here several times, yet I didn't need to use my fire extinguisher. That's because the fuel tanks in this vehicle are modeled such that they are separate entities from the vehicle's damage model. In layman's terms, setting this vehicle on fire by shooting the fuel tanks, which are those essentially part of the suspension, those kind of struts that come down and the tracks are attached to, those are the fuel tanks. If you hit those, you will cause a fire. However, the fire does no actual damage to the interior of the vehicle, and it will not kill the crew, it will not burn the tank out, it won't do anything like that. It'll just go out in about 5 or 6 seconds after you set it on fire. And that's not a bug, that's intentional. And it's, I believe, the only vehicle in the game that currently does that. So maybe vehicles that are also have similar features we'll get this later on. I don't know. But as you can see, it's far from invincible to vehicles that are even slightly above it. And because it's an 8.3 battle rating, it's going to see a lot of these vehicles. It occurs to me that a good description of this tank in general is that this is essentially a T10 on steroids. Take everything that was good about the T10 and turn it up to 11. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that this vehicle isn't ludicrously strong. It is. And personally, I think that this vehicle can go up to about 8.7 at the very minimum, if not maybe 9.0. I think that APHE is good enough and the gun is good enough that it could survive at 9.0 even. So, why is that? Well, it's fast as hell. It's got a stabilized gun, so it's not like the it's not going to struggle like the IS-7 does in the fact that you kind of have to get the jump on people. It's got great armor that's actually resistant to a lot of high penetration kinetic energy rounds, and even some heat rounds if you can angle yourself correctly and bait the enemy into shooting a part of the vehicle that they're never going to penetrate. And it's almost impossible to set on fire. I've survived situations in this vehicle that I should never have gotten away with. That being said, and having said everything compared to the IS-7, does this mean that the IS-7 is a worthless piece of shit? No, I don't think so. The IS-7 is going to be a good backup to something like this, but the IS-7 is going to have to step aside for something like this. The 279 is frankly a better vehicle in nearly every way. Now, it does have some serious downsides. The biggest weakness I've seen on this vehicle is that your gun barrel and your cannon breech are easily knocked out, especially by autocannon fire. The gun mantlet around the base of the gun is only 100 millimeters thick. It's very, very weak. Weak enough that autocannons can pen it pretty easily. So you're going to spend a lot of time repairing your gun and your cannon breech. In addition, the sides of the vehicle, they have a portion right under the turret that is like cast to accommodate the width of the turret, and as a result, that area is vertical. If you look in the damage, or if you look at the vehicle in the armor viewer, you can very easily see that bit sticking up on the sides of the hull, where the turret ring is being accommodated there, and that's only about 170 millimeters of effective armor if it's flat on. So if you happen to catch this vehicle in the side, you can very easily kill it with a single shot there. In addition, like other Soviet tanks, it's got ammunition literally fucking everywhere inside this vehicle. And here you can see the vehicle being set on fire, but not actually doing anything. And he's spraying away, and I've got fires going all along my suspension, but they go out within a matter of a couple of seconds. And it all contributes to this vehicle being ridiculously resilient for what it is. So overall, my impressions: is this vehicle worth your time? Yeah, I'd say so. If you're somebody who's looking at this vehicle and like either as a collector, or you just really like Soviet heavy tanks, or you're just wondering whether or not you should sell this thing for a high profit, it'll be worth your time. I guarantee you. If you have the time to put in, you won't regret it one way or another. Whether you decide to keep it or sell it, I think you'll get a good deal out of it. So that's pretty much all I have to say about the Object 279, but I've got a ton of gameplay here from just playing around with it. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to call the commentary here and just show you a game all on its own, so you guys can see how this vehicle performs by itself. So without further ado, I will leave you guys here and enjoy the gameplay.